completely.
See the way he was shaking that shit, bro.
Some other insects are passionate.
Ouch! Every single clip we seen a praying mantis in this video, they just been clapping other bugs, bro.
I was cruising down the street, fuck these, 3 bitches, 1 yabba on me, and the yabba might well be, cause it got 2 arms and some feet, cause they wake up in the morning and eat. I love my chopper and I think it love me, probably cause I let that bitch do what it please, call her hitters cause he gon' shoot free.
Okay, now. Dress is back, bro. Listen, today we got one of my favorite YouTube channels. We got TierZoo. Now, TierZoo, I believe, is one of the most innovative channels on this platform. And that is why I love TierZoo, bro. Because he be spitting these animal facts, bro. He be telling you facts about different animals and all that bullshit. But he be doing it in like a game sense. In like, he be using game terminology to explain what animals do and how they behave and all that bullshit. So it's like, so it makes the facts more like, I don't know, it makes it appealing. It makes his videos appealing to a very wide base, to a very wide demographic of people. And that's why I love it. I've been watching this guy since I was 14 years old. Anyways, let's get into it. Today we have the insect tier list. He's gonna have the tier list. He's gonna be talking about which insects are the shittest and which ones are the best. Let's get into it. Jack Jumper Ants. The hell is that? Damn, he got murked. Oh shit!
I need healing. Insects
Slap
are
the shit
one of the
out of
most
me.
broken factions the game has ever seen.
Most definitely.
Nowhere else in nature will you find such an incredible concentration of abilities that are not.
But I'm more broken though. I see a fucking moth on the floor or a beetle on the floor. I crush it. Simple. I squish it.
Only overpowered.
They can't fuck with me for real. Unless it's like a cockroach or a bee or something. Actually, not even. So I'm not even scared of it. There's not a lot of shit I'm scared of. I just squish it.
But also extremely unique. It's tough to even know where to start when talking about what makes insects such a successful group. Because in a lot of cases, it's not just that their individual abilities are overpowered, but some of them feel like they should be mutually exclusive, since they're just insanely OP when used in combination with one another. You'll see what I mean once I get into the tier list, but first, a brief overview of the insect faction's general attributes and history. Insects were added to the game during the early Carboniferous expansion. The devs bumped up the atmospheric oxygen level, which allowed members of the arthropod faction to adopt larger sizes and more costly abilities. And while most of the arthropod player base was trying to dominate the land by leveling up their size, a small offshoot of the crustacean player base opted to forego the gigantism trait
gonna do him like that?
and instead used this oxygen bonus to unlock an ability never before seen in-game. Flight. Because these new creatures were the very first to gain the ability to fly, the air became entirely their domain for the time being, and would remain that way until reptiles unlocked the ability several expansions later. Insects are extremely diverse in their abilities and stat spreads.
Got his ass.
In fact, they're so diverse that it's impossible to include them all in a single video.
I've never seen a black praying mantis before. Holy shit. That shit looks cool as hell. And also terrifying.
I'll be keeping things fairly
oh my god, that shit is beautiful. What the hell? What kind of bug is that?
generalized, but truth be told,
that's the type of shit I just keep. I just take it just to keep it. I preserve it in like a block of resin or some shit like that. That shit is beautiful.
Many of the groups I'll be discussing today have so many standout members that they could easily be an entire tier list in and of themselves. So it's a little tough to pin down their general attributes, but there are a few commonalities. Being members of the arthropod faction, all insects are granted the exoskeletal armor perk, which greatly raises their AC compared to soft-bodied builds of similar sizes, with the only downside being a massive reduction in those same defensive stats for a short time every time the player levels up. This makes insects quite tanky on average, allowing them to excel in combat. The insect build also has access to the Compound Eyes perk, which grants them vastly improved awareness compared to other arthropods like scorpions and centipedes. With 360-degree vision, their ability to avoid obstacles, dodge attacks, and pursue targets while flying is far superior to most other flyers. This enhanced
Wait, what do you say
perception,
right there?
360-degree vision, their ability to avoid obstacles, dodge attacks, and pursue targets while flying is far superior to most other flyers. This
Facts.
enhanced perception perk is important because insects tend to
You got 360-degree court vision. Like, you can't stop him. If he was on the court, he's gonna be diming that ball like Magic Johnson. I'm telling you, insects, they got that vision for real.
have naturally high stealth. So in order to compete with other insect builds, acute vision is required. We've only just scratched the surface of the insane abilities insects have access to though. For a more in-depth look, let's get into the tier list. At the bottom of the
Silverfish.
tier list, we have the silverfish. The silverfish is the most primitive insect build still in existence. It kind of blurs the line
Looks
between what
ancient.
is and is not considered an insect, and
Okay.
not in a good way. Unlike other
Wow.
flightless insects, which decided to respec and drop the flight ability in favor of more refined strategies, the silverfish build actually never had access to it in the first place. Aside
Damn.
from having an exoskeleton,
Trash.
they don't really have any of the abilities that make insects powerful. They do not have wings and have essentially no combat abilities. They have
So their existence is just pointless then. You're just there to be fodder. That's just how some animals are. They just exist to be fodder for other animals. And if they weren't there, the whole ecosystem would fall apart because it's like, who's going to be fodder now?
fairly low defenses and get bodied left and right by pretty much everything, with their only useful stat being their decently high movement speed. Their special ability allows them to gain XP from eating cellulose and lignin, meaning they can farm XP from wooden structures, which normally don't grant.
Fun fact about cellulose and lignin: humans do not have the enzymes to digest cellulose, so it just passes through our body. Cellulose is what we call fiber, and that helps with peristalsis, which is the movement of food through our digestive tract. So the more fiber that's in our food, the more water that the less water there is in our food. So our food's gonna be harder when it's traveling through our body, and that stimulates the peristalsis to work harder. So it makes your digestive tract work harder to push the food out because it's harder. Also makes your shit harder as well. But it's good for your digestive system though, because it makes it work. Makes it not be lazy. You get what I'm saying? That's a good fun fact for you guys right there.
Any experience. This ability would be fairly powerful in forest biomes, but because they're such weak combatants, they tend to actually stick to urban areas, feeding on things like paper and cloth, in the relative safety of houses, apartments, and office spaces. Even there, they aren't completely safe though. And while no build is ever truly safe in the insect meta, the silverfish's extreme lack of useful abilities
Spider
places it
got
firmly
his
in
ass.
F tier. That's honestly the only insect build I believe deserves an F tier ranking. Most
Only one?
insects
That's
are
good.
quite viable, and even the less viable ones tend to have at least a few useful things going for them, even if those things aren't necessarily broken. First
Gotta
in
have
D tier,
something.
we have the Phasmid build, which includes walking
Stick
sticks
insect.
and leaf mimics. These builds sport what are unquestionably some of the most impressive camouflage abilities in the entire game, second only to color-changing builds like the Octopus and Chameleon.
Damn. No.
As impressive as the
Listen, octopus. Listen, you've never seen camouflage like an octopus and a cuttlefish, bro. Them shits is on a different level. You think them shits are like aliens for real. Honestly, I'm telling you, the way them guys they can camouflage, they can change their skin texture to match a rock is crazy, and their color as well. And the thing is, they can't even perceive color like we do. So like, you don't even know how they know that they have to change their skin color to the same color as the rock. It's crazy.
these are, though, the question I constantly end up asking is this really necessary?
Apparently they don't have color codes to their eyes or some shit like that. I don't know. I forgot.
Because with the exception of insects which deliberately lower their stealth as part of the aposematic coloration strategy, insects as a whole already have an above average stealth, and are usually able to maintain this while still speccing into other equally impressive abilities. Their camouflage can only take them so far. While they're near undetectable while remaining motionless, walking sticks still need to move to find food. And while they do mimic the movement of a swaying leaf or branch, this certainly isn't perfect. In fact, if they're ever caught in an environment where camouflage doesn't match as well, their instincts to sway and move can actually end up giving their position away even more, rather than aiding in their attempts to hide. Some phasmids do possess chemical
Tough.
defenses, But as we'll see further up the tier list, this attack is quite mild compared to the heat some other insects are packing. Phasmids have a similar game plan to sloths, complete with all the major flaws this strategy is riddled with. Although at least phasmids don't completely...
You see the way he was shaking that shit, bro? He was like...
Further up the tier list, this attack is quite mild compared to the heat some other insects are packing.
Ouch!
Phasmids have a similar game plan to sloths, complete with all the major flaws this strategy is riddled with. Although at least phasmids don't completely forego all common sense and make
was that a stick insect, bro? Holy shit. I not even noticed that. Yeah, that camouflage is crazy.
Riddled with. Although at least phasmids don't completely forego all common sense and make a dangerous trek to the forest floor once a week just to poop. Next in D tier, we have the Lepidopterans, the faction which includes moths, butterflies, and skippers. At first glance, these may seem like absolute bottom tier builds. They're among the most vulnerable builds in the game when it comes to combat, with extremely squishy defensive stats and utterly abysmal offensive abilities. Many of the larval forms of these builds are 100% defenseless and have a mobility stat in the single digits.
Oh my
literally the freest kills in the game. However, Lepid player base
what
is
the hell? Ew. Bro's brains were coming out of his head or some bullshit like that. Ew, that's gross.
And has come up with a few ways of at least sort of mitigating their many weaknesses. Caterpillars and adult lepids alike can adopt quite convincing disguises, some designed to help them blend in, and some designed to intimidate. Granted, these strategies often don't hold up against high intelligence builds, but it does help. Some caterpillars spec into quite potent defenses, like spines and toxins, which make them simply not worth the potential damage to take on. And credit where credit is due, even though they still are fairly defenseless, butterflies and moths do have excellent mobility, and can fly much greater distances than most insect builds. This enables them to avoid high conflict areas of the map, and reach higher quality loot that might be too rare for most players to rely on. Their massive wings, in addition to being highly customizable for a variety of stealth or intimidation purposes,
that shit looks
also
cool
just
as hell.
make them look much larger than insects of comparable body sizes, which helps dissuade attacks.
Now this is one of my favorite butterflies. I forgot what it's called, but look at its wings right here. The shit looks like a snake. It mimics a snake to scare off birds and shit.
But ultimately, lepids still take plenty of L's, and most high-tier insect builds have quite oppressive matchups against them, so they're definitely a below-average faction. That's actually it for D tier, and I know it might seem like we're moving up the tier list quickly, but again, insects are a massively successful faction, and are going to be concentrated in the higher tiers.
Cockroach is only C tier.
We have the
I thought that shit would be S tier or A at least.
Ultimate survivor, which opted to spec into mobility, stealth, and a multitude of elemental resistances in lieu of any offensive abilities. While they don't pack much heat, their flat shape allows them to easily wedge themselves into locations that are extremely difficult for other players to attack them in. They're rather clumsy flyers, but they do have an above-average ground movement speed, enabling them to quickly scurry to cover if they see a predator player approaching. However, when caught out in the open or backed into a corner,
thank God we don't have any cockroaches in Ireland. I don't know what I'd do if I saw one.
They're fairly helpless and easily one of the most vulnerable builds in the entire insect faction. They're also somewhat carried by human mains, making temperate and tundra servers viable for them, because really, as impressive as their toxin and radiation resistance abilities are, they're quite vulnerable to the cold, and would still be mostly confined to jungle servers, if not for humans unlocking the fire control ability. The biggest variants may be able to tank 1 or 2 hits, but even then, with no way to fight back, they're still pretty screwed if they fail to outright escape
All they can do is survive. That's crazy.
Next in C tier we have the Earwig, a fearsome-looking generalist build, which appears to have a giant pair of mandibles on its rear end, called Circe. As fearsome as these Circe forceps are, if we actually check the Earwig's base stats, we quickly notice that, just like all of its other stats, its power stat is actually quite mediocre. As menacing as the Circe are, the actual piercing damage they can deal is fairly minimal, and can even be deflected by the most basic of armor. And even against builds
I'm not gonna lie, I thought earwigs were more OP than that. I thought their shits would get you like crab claws, bro. Them shits look terrifying. They don't look very terrifying right now. And I thought they were bigger than that.
Without armor, the damage is so low that larger builds still don't really need to be wary of approaching an earwig, and can attack without restraint. Still, just because they can doesn't mean they do, as the earwig's intimidation factor alone is oftentimes enough to protect it from conflict. And credit where credit is due, the forceps are actually fairly decent in matchups against soft-bodied insects, and allow the earwig to carry their targets much better than they could with their jaws. And while it may seem silly to have opted for rear-facing weapons instead of the more typical forward-facing ones,
what the hell is that? I've never seen a beetle like that in my life.
Like mandibles and rostrums, the position does actually serve a purpose, in that it allows earwigs far greater access to burrows and tight spaces, where they can hide out and avoid conflict altogether.
Okay.
Of all of the weapons insects have access to, Circe might be some of the most unorthodox, which probably contributes to its ability to intimidate other players. However, I think to get out of mid-tier, earwigs need to actually have the ability to back up their threat display. They would do well to spec into some sort of venom. Venom-infused stings are a fairly common attribute for insects, so this feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. So, while certainly a viable mid-tier, don't overestimate this build's abilities.
Okay.
At the top of C tier, we've got the orthopterans, including grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids. These are the first mobility-centric builds on our list. While they're quite capable flyers, their true power comes from their saltatorial hind legs rather than their wings. Flight is an excellent defensive ability, as it allows the user to get out of reach of an attack's range.
Bro, I wish I could fly. I just fly everywhere. I won't even need a car anymore.
But this utility is lessened if their ability to get airborne has too much startup lag. And so instead of using their wings to get themselves up into the air, a powerful jump enables the orthopteran mains to escape vertically at instant speed. Their excellent vision makes it extremely difficult to get within striking range without alerting them. And because their jump has such excellent frame data, landing an ambush strike on an orthopteran can feel near impossible at times. And even if a player does manage to secure a grab, their powerful hind legs can function as quite an effective combo break. The spines on their legs augments the damage their kicks can deal, meaning that if a grasshopper can tank the first few hits of an ambush attack, they may be able to turn the tide of a confrontation.
So they got weaponized hind legs.
Dealing serious damage to the attacker. With that said, I think there are a few flaws in their strategy, which I think keeps them out of the upper tiers. Grasshoppers can jump so far that there's really no way of knowing what sort of situation they're about to put themselves in. In a similar manner to the flying fish, using such a drastic escape option can sometimes end up putting you in a worse position than you were before. Especially...
Hold on, so they only use it, they should only use it as like a last resort type of thing.
Your local meta has a lot of spider players, and although they do present a challenge, most predator players aren't disrupted by the grasshopper's kicks, and can either tank the damage outright or one-hit the grasshopper before it even has a chance to
Praying mantis gotta be S tier, bro. That shit is way too OP.
Retaliate.
Like,
at the bottom of B tier, we have...
Like, listen. Okay, bottom of B tier. What's that called? What's that shit called? Okay, back to praying mantis. Every single clip we've seen of praying mantis in this video, they just been clapping other bugs, bro. Just clapping other bugs. Nothing of them getting hassled or hindered or pressed at all. Just them doing the oppression.
Even has a chance to retaliate. At the bottom of B tier, we have the hemipterans, a diverse order of insects with a few things in common, including generally having high defense and being somewhat shield-shaped. However, the most notable thing is that rather than slicing or pinching mouth parts, the hemiptera build opts for a piercing rostrum, perfect for puncturing
these are mosquitoes and shit.
For the majority of hemipteran builds, this allows them to farm XP from sources that are normally hard to access, like the energy-dense sap inside trees and stems, or the starch inside of seeds. However, there are some hemipterans which use their sharp rostrum to deliver a venomous bite that is able to pierce through armored targets. Their venom is powerful enough to one-shot just about any other insect, and can even deal severe damage to larger builds. The only major shortcoming here is that these so-called assassin bugs tend to actually have fairly low stealth, opting for the aposematic intimidation defense I mentioned earlier. And on top of all that, they have fairly low mobility, making actually ambushing another player kind of difficult if they're actually paying enough attention to simply dodge the attacks and
Called an assassin bug for
Some
what?
do break this trend though, and opt for both better camouflage and high aquatic mobility, making them some of the most fearsome aquatic builds in the game. On the herbivore side of things, hemipterans tend to fare a bit worse. they usually still have fairly low mobility and low stealth, and their defenses may be higher than the average, but are nowhere near as impenetrable as some of the builds higher on this list. They tend to...
Wait, so this isn't the mosquito? I mean, they have a proboscis, but like, I don't think this is not mosquito.
To rely on a
Mosquito is probably S tier.
chemical defense similar to some phasmids, which is where they get the name stink bugs from. However, similar to phasmids, these defenses also tend to be a bit lacking and
Smash his
often
ass
fail to
up.
deter attackers.
Out of there.
So certainly a group with some standout members and fine for XP farming, but still nothing
Yeah.
too broken.
Or good for foraging and shit, finding food, you know, accessing food sources that other insects can't access. But that's about all they're good for. Crazy.
And topping off B tier, we have the Neuroptera, a rather clumsy build with some pretty pathetic looking base stats. Genuinely one of the least agile flyers in the entire game. However, looking at the final form of this build paints a highly misleading picture of its capabilities. The larval form, which is the form they spend the vast majority of their time in, is a brutally effective predator build for any player who prefers the camping playstyle. Taking a look at the larva's stats, we see that they have incredibly high power and stealth for their size. Antlions have a devastating venomous bite, which they use to one-shot unsuspecting players before draining all of their life points with their hollow jaws. Because of their ability to construct pitfall traps, their passive stealth rating is extremely high, making their ambush playstyle unbelievably effective. As if escape wasn't hard enough, once the prey gets caught in their trap, the antlion even has the ability to launch projectiles to stun its target, making escape a near impossibility. I have an entire video dedicated to the overpowered abilities of Neuropteran larvae, but in short, they are what the earwig pretends to be. If you took the earwig's Circe, put them in front and made them sharper and gave them deadly venom to boot, you'd have an antlion. So why the weak adult form? Having spent all their evolution points optimizing their larval form,
just for reproduction, innit?
They spend hardly any time at all as adults. They don't even have the ability to eat in this form, and really only exist to be a vessel that allows players to find each other and complete the mating questline, something they lack the ability to do in their much less mobile larval form. So while I do think it'd be more impressive if they didn't take such a massive cut to their power level during their final level up, there's no denying that for the vast majority of their playtime, these builds are an absolute menace to encounter.
Most definitely.
At the bottom of A tier, we have a
It's only A tier, and at the bottom, that's crazy.
personal favorite of mine, the Mantis. Mantises have a fairly straightforward playstyle consisting of slashing and grabbing their targets using powerful spiked raptorial forelimbs.
Once they grab you, it's over.
If we take a look at the Mantis' stats, we see that the Mantis has one of the highest base power stats of any non-venomous insect. It also has a stealth stat similar to that of a walking stick, which it desperately needs in order to be able to get within striking range of its targets. Its clumsy flight and slow ground movement speed makes chasing prey basically impossible. However, what they lack in movement speed, they easily make up for with strike speed. The Mantis' strike is lightning quick, to the point that it's easily able to hit targets that are normally considered hopelessly evasive. As powerful as these strikes are,
they be punching niggas, they be snatching niggas, and they be throwing them hands. Snatch him up and eat him. Simple.
The weakness of the strategy is that the grappling attack doesn't immobilize the target, and actually brings them within range of a counterattack. And
what the hell happened right there?
While the Mantis' large size enables it to tank most counterattacks, attacking a venomous target can end up being a serious blunder for a Mantis player.
Oh
so
shit.
Definitely a powerful high tier predator, but not one that's so invincible that
oh
Mantis
my
mains
goodness.
can get
Oh my god. My goodness. Murked him. Look at that. Murked him. This is the first time we're seeing the Mantis get destroyed.
Not one that's so invincible that Mantis can get careless. Next in A tier we have the flies. This does get a bit confusing due to the amount of other builds that use the word fly in their name.
Okay, I understand this one because they can live in they can live in pretty much every single environment, reproduce on anything. Yeah, makes sense. Just simply because of access. Where'd you see flies? You see flies everywhere.
Specific feature. True flies only have 2 wings. This might seem like a major trade-off, but while it does leave them more vulnerable to having their flight ability disabled from taking damage, the perk they unlock in return is more than worth the risk. Instead of a
is it?
second pair of wings, flies swap them out for halteres, a sensory structure that grants flies an insanely powerful buff to their aerial maneuverability and their evasion. Their superior aerobatics make them all but impossible to land a hit on midair, and also
Nice.
enables
I
predator
like that.
fly variants, such as the robber fly, to launch incredibly precise attacks mid-flight, and take
That's
down
fire.
targets that would normally be too powerful to confront head-on, but are unable to effectively counterattack during flight. However, most flies are either scavengers or parasites, using their quick mobility and superior reaction speed to weave
Hey,
past
blink.
the defenses and avoid
You know when it flies in your eye, you just blink and crunch that shit.
the sweeping
Done that many
counterattacks of
times.
larger players. While they do have an extremely short lifespan, there's no denying that they make the most of the time they do have, and are one of the most efficient and evasive builds in the entire game.
Oh,
But while
shit.
flies are excellent aerial combatants, they are no match for the ultimate aerial hunter build.
Dragonflies. Oh,
The
shit.
dragonfly is similar to the crocodile in that it is one of the most well-optimized PvP builds that has ever existed in the game. It's already
Oh,
such
shit.
an efficient build that across several balance patches and game expansions, the dragonfly has seen very few changes to its core strategy. They simply aren't necessary,
Okay.
as the dragonfly is already equipped to deal with just about anything the devs throw at it. So
Hey.
what is it about the dragonfly that has given it such a competitive edge? Dragonflies
Let's
have
see.
the best aerial maneuverability of any build in the game, and the high
No. This is true. This is very true. Every time you see a dragonfly, look at how they fly. Them niggas fly like drones, bro. They can hover mid-air. They can zoom like this. It's actually crazy how they move.
top
This
flight
is
speed
facts.
of any insect. Unlike most insects, dragonflies have spec'd into the ability to move their wings independently of each other, which grants
What?
them the ability to move in any direction without needing to turn and face that direction, meaning they
Yeah,
can
that's
strafe
crazy.
mid-flight and even
That's
fly
insane.
backwards. This ability makes their flight
Stop
more
bothering them
energetically
little dolphins,
demanding
bro.
than it is for other insects. So this is a high
God,
commitment,
his
high
ass
reward
crazy.
playstyle. In order to ensure a proper payoff for their incredible agility, dragonflies have also spec'd into what is arguably the best vision of any arthropod. Extremely large, high-resolution eyes that take up basically their entire head, granting them full
Shit look like
360-degree
goggles,
vision.
bro.
This allows them to track all potential targets around them with ease, and allows
Oh.
them to see attacks coming long before they're actually at risk of getting hit. Unlike many of the other builds on this list, which either have a powerful larval form but a weak adult form, or a powerful adult form that can only achieve this after enduring an extremely vulnerable early game, the dragonfly is a high-tier predator in both forms. While everyone knows that
The nymph. The nymph. I know what it's called. It's called the nymph. They spend most of their time in the water. And they be murking shit in the water as well. Dragonflies are crazy, bro.
dominate the skies when they reach their max level, what you might not know is that as nymphs, dragonflies are one of the most vicious aquatic builds in the game, able to one-shot similarly sized fish and amphibian players.
Fire.
Now, while it was tempting to put dragonflies in S tier, they do have a few shortcomings. While they are generally able to see approaching predators before it's too
Oh.
late, they aren't particularly good at avoiding accidentally flying into dangerous situations.
Shit.
They're easily trapped by spiderwebs and are often snatched out of the air when flying too close to another player.
Damn.
In addition, dragonflies cannot walk, meaning that their energy-expensive flight ability is their only option if they need to
They can't
reposition
walk?
themselves. Not that devastating of a weakness, but it's enough that this ancient build can't quite break into S tier.
Makes sense.
First in S tier, we have the beetle.
Beetles.
The beetle is the epitome of the insect build. A bunch of extraordinarily powerful abilities
Gotta be
that
maxed
seem
out
like they
defense,
shouldn't really
bro.
function properly when used in conjunction with each other, yet somehow actually end up synergizing unbelievably well. Beetles are the premier tanks of the insect faction, with an outer cuticle sturdy enough to deflect just about any attack with ease. It has such a high AC that it can confidently plow through a swarm of aggressive ants without
Damn.
taking any damage, something that even many reptiles and amphibians can't get away with. Now, typically when a build is heavily invested into defenses like this, it
It'll be
has to
slow.
make a lot of
Mobility.
sacrifices in its other stats. This is the opposite of what we see in the beetle build, as in addition to being the most heavily armored insect in the game, it also excels in several other metrics.
They
The
have
most
the game,
obvious
bro.
of which is its power stat. Beetles can obliterate their enemies in combat using powerful jaws and explosive chemical
Oh
weapons.
yeah, most definitely. Them
Their
shits are
ability to
strong as
bulldoze
hell.
opponents with their forward-facing weaponry is hard to overstate. But in my opinion, their real damage potential comes from beetles which possess the ability to blast their attackers with a toxic or acidic chemical burst. But that's not where the craziness stops, because although you'd probably expect a high-power tank to
Bro, blasting ass juice at his enemies, bro. That's crazy.
be a slow, lumbering build, beetles also possess the top terrestrial movement speed of any insect. And if that weren't enough, despite often having heavy horns or giant mandibles,
Listen, these guys have maxed out defense and maxed out mobility. That's crazy. When have you ever heard about that in any game? Usually in games, it's like when you're high on defense, you be slow. But this is not the case for the beetle, bro. It broke the game.
packing a tank full of noxious chemicals, being clad in heavy armor, and strapped with enough muscle to move objects far, far above their weight class, the beetle is still able to fly without much
Yeah,
issue.
get the fuck out of my face.
Now, they
nigga.
did sacrifice one of their sets of wings for additional armor, so they can't perform the advanced aerobatics that dragonflies and houseflies can.
Doesn't
But
matter
the
though.
ability to get from point A to point B via flight is still extremely valuable, both for escaping danger and for reaching valuable points of interest. In short, beetles have essentially every ability they could ask for. They are an amalgamation of everything that makes the insect faction so powerful, and so it's no surprise that beetle species comprise a whopping 25% of all species in the game.
Shit.
They're so
That was
versatile
kinda
and
gross, though.
adaptable that a beetle player can find a niche in essentially any server. They truly are the ultimate insect and deserve a tier list of their own. As
Most
incredible
definitely.
as this combination of powerful abilities is, ultimately the beetle is still lacking the most powerful insect ability of them all.
What is it?
Sociality.
Oh.
Now, I have an entire video dedicated to explaining just
I forgot about this, bro. Yes, I know what the next two are. Is bees and ants, isn't it?
how broken this ability is, and there's no question that the insects that incorporate it into their game plan simply dominate all in their path. Now, technically, termites are a variant of the cockroach build, but they have
What?
such a unique and powerful playstyle that lumping them in with mid-tier cockroaches seems disingenuous. The termite queen is the longest-lived insect in the game, with a lifespan near that of a human or elephant.
Oh,
and
shit.
it spends these many decades building one of the most powerful armies the game has ever seen. These termite armies are able to construct some of the most well-fortified bases in the game, giving even beaver dams and human skyscrapers a run for their money. Not only do they build incredible bases, but termites literally transform the map in order to better optimize their colony's ability to gather resources. They will pave paths and build ramps and bridges to important resource deposits. This
Fire.
efficiency allows them to support a huge army and command vast territories. Termites, despite being most closely related to cockroaches, have a combat style that is
I'm sorry. I want to see something again. Let's go back a little bit. Look at these shits, bro. They're taller than trees. You mean to tell me these little ass termites made that? That's crazy. World is a crazy place, bro.
deposits. This efficiency allows them to support a huge army and command vast territories. Termites, despite being most closely related to cockroaches, have a combat style that is actually most similar to the spitting cobra, which, if you've seen my snake tier list, you'd know is also a top tier build. Termites can accurately fire acid from a needle-like horn on their face, dealing heavy damage to anything caught in its blast. Some termites opt for giant slicing jaws instead of acid sprayers on their head, and are crucial for defending their base from an onslaught of invaders. Termites are a somewhat imbalanced build, with crazy powerful forward-facing weaponry, but extremely vulnerable abdomens with no armor at all.
Oh
This
shit.
means that oftentimes, despite a larger size, they are quickly overwhelmed if they get outnumbered and flanked.
Yeah,
Not
makes
usually
sense.
an issue, as termites are proficient at defending in a phalanx formation, which covers the weak points of individual members. So certainly not a bad enough weakness to negate the top tier status of eusociality. But this weakness does mean that I gotta give the top spot to the other eusocial insect faction.
Ants, bees, and wasps.
Hymenoptera
Yes,
is
sir.
a group of insects that includes ants, bees, and wasps. Unlike termites, these insects are a bit more well-rounded,
Holy shit, you see the amount of abilities they have.
having decent armor all over, and tend to have both forward and rear-facing weaponry, with most hymenopterans packing strong jaws and a venomous stinger. The wasp's signature buzz and yellow banding are so infamous that almost every other insect faction in the game has at least
You see how that nigga came to the cut. Look,
hymenopterans
watch
packing
this.
strong
Watch
jaws
these.
and a venomous stinger. The wasp
My nigga came to the cup. Boom. You know what's up, bro. You know what's up. This nigga scared shitless. Look at that. Look at that intimidation. Nigga got Conqueror's Aki. That nigga using Conqueror's Aki on this nigga, bro.
signature buzz
You know
and
what's
yellow
up, bro.
banding
You know
are
what's
so
up.
infamous that almost every other insect faction in the game has at least a few members trying to replicate it to gain advantage on their own intimidation checks. Eusocial hymenopterans can build extremely complicated structures without the use of
It's like these niggas are so much fear that other niggas are copying them, bro. Trendsetters for real.
tools. They can launch organized attacks containing thousands of combatants.
Oh
They can
my
capture
goodness.
prisoners, cross major barriers, and control territory to an
They basically
absolutely
do everything.
incredible degree. Thousands of players will lay down their
Get
lives
his
in
eyes,
defense
jumping
of
him,
a
jumping
colony
him,
if
jumping
need
him,
be.
jumping him. Let's go.
Ants in particular are masters of both empire building and military tactics,
Yes,
often
sir.
having to wage war on multiple fronts while undertaking large construction and agricultural projects in their own territory.
Wow.
So, while beetles may take up
There's also a species of ants that can also can cultivate their own food using fungus. What they'll do is that they'll get pieces of leaves and shit and vegetation, and they'll coat it in this fungus. The fungus will then break down the leaf into like a substance that they can eat, and then they take that shit and they eat it. There's also another type of ant that can enslave other ant colonies, like other species, and make them slaves to their own colony. And sometimes those the slaves, they can rebel and just be like a whole war going down, just straight chaos, bro. It's crazy.
up a larger percentage of total insect variants, termites and ants both vastly outnumber any other insect build. And while I don't base my tier lists purely off of population, there's no denying that the abundance of these insects is due to their
Most
incredibly
definitely.
powerful strategies and their ability to bend their environment to their advantage. In fact, the only genuine threats to
Yeah. Is that them right
and
there?
their ability to
I think that's them right there. Yeah, leaf cutter ants. That's what they're called. Those are the ones that be cultivating their own food.
bend their environment to their advantage. In fact, the only genuine threats to you social players tend to be invaders disguising themselves as members of their own colony,
Oh shit.
but are really there to disrupt, steal, and attack. Many spider, hemiptera, and mantis mains adopt
I
this
didn't know
strategy
spiders could do that.
and are incredibly successful in doing so. As the ant troops forage and browse unknown territory, the parasites weave their way into their ranks. Something similar happens when you browse the internet without using NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video. As you browse, trackers latch onto your
That's gonna be the smoothest ad transition I've ever seen. You know what? I'm gonna let it play through because that shit was smooth. That
system
shit
and
was
follow
smooth,
you
bro.
from one page to another.
Holy shit.
Stealing your vulnerable private data, just like ant-mimicking spiders steal vulnerable worker
One
ants
thing
the
about
moment their
TierZoo
backs
is that
are turned. NordVPN's
his
new
ad
threat
transitions
protection
you'd never
feature
see it
can watch
coming.
your back, making sure
That nigga's
you
a
aren't being
finesser,
followed,
bro.
blocking
Go follow all of this, bro. TierZoo is one of the best channels on YouTube. I'm telling you. Follow all of it. Everything. Wow. So anybody got any animal facts for me? I love learning animal facts. Just say it in the comments, bro. Let me read that shit. I'll read it. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video if you like what you see. All that bullshit. You get what I'm saying? I'm out.
Understood.